For the next couple of videos, we are going to be looking at the roots of progressivism and the progressive era. So when we think about the progressives, we're really thinking about this ideology that's being presented about ways that the United States can and should start to improve itself. So to give a little bit of context here, what we're seeing is that in the late 19th century, there is going to be rapid industrialization and urbanization. This westward expansion is taking off very quickly. There's a lot more immigration. Some of these topics we have already discussed in previous weeks, but it does lead to some social and economic instability. Many Americans, especially those who are part of the middle and upper classes, started to fear this idea of class conflict and how it could potentially destabilize the country. People were also starting to become more concerned with the fact that the United States, particularly with its industrialism, was growing faster than regulations could help to sort of regulate this growth of industrialism. And so with this, for progressives, they really start to believe that the country needs to have some sort of a reform to avoid a collapse, and they want to change things oftentimes through not just the government, but also through influencing what people think and what people might believe. So for the next video, we'll spend a little bit more time talking about the progressives themselves. But I think one way we can really look at this is to look at how the progressives use new journalistic techniques in order to really persuade viewers and audiences of their opinions. So for example, there's going to be a massive impact of printing and photo reproduction. The technology for this is going to absolutely skyrocket over the course of the 18 and into the early 1900s. So what that means is that it's much easier for newspapers to print pictures. We're talking, of course, about photographs, so real photos are going to be important, but you can also see that not only that, but political cartoons are also going to be easier to distribute from one publication source to the next, which is going to help to spread ideas. We also start to see that there are going to be a lot of sort of fictional exposés that are created. When we think about these fictional exposés, an example would be Frank Norris's The Octopus in 1901, and another one from Theodore Dreiser, his The Financier in 1912. They're based on real-life figures, and they're aimed to depict sort of these industrial elites and to show off corporate greed and the impact of corporate greed. Oftentimes, we will see that these progressives are going to be referred to often as muckrakers. And these muckraking journalists and novelists, they really want to help show some of the corruption that is taking place in the United States. Arguably, one of the best ways that they are able to do this that's still talked about today, and you might have even encountered this in an English class, is going to be when it comes to the meatpacking industry, particularly in the Northeast, in cities like New York. For the meatpacking industry, very commonly they would use workers who are going to be from immigrant families. They pay them very, very low wages. They are going to have to work very, very long hours. This is going to be before regulations come into place. So we're thinking about working 12-hour days, maybe having 30 minutes for lunch, being paid at the very, very sort of bare minimum of what a person would be able to work for. So as far as The Jungle, it is going to be a novel written by Upton Sinclair. It's about a fictional family of immigrants who are going to be working in the meatpacking industry. And in working in this meatpacking industry, it not only shows the hardships of immigrants, but the even longer lasting impact it has is that it shows how nasty the actual meatpacking industry itself is. So as far as the Jungle, you can actually access the full audiobook on YouTube if you are interested in that. But I just want us to listen to a quick excerpt. What you're going to be listening to here is sort of a description of how they might make different things like pork and ham seem more appealing than it actually is.
A machine consisting of a hollow needle attached to a pump. By plunging this needle into the meat and working with his foot, a man could fill a ham with pickle in a few seconds. And yet, in spite of this, there would be hams found spoiled, some of them with an odor so bad that a man could hardly bear to be in the room with them. To pump into these, the packers had a second and much stronger pickle, which destroyed the odor, a process known to the workers as giving them 30%. Also, after the hams had been smoked, there would be found some that had gone to the bad. Formerly, these had been sold as number 3 grade, but later on some ingenious person had hit upon a new device, and now they would extract the bone, about which the bad part generally lay, and insert in the hole a white hot iron. After this invention, there was no longer number 1, number 2, and 3 grade. There was only number 1 grade.
So even in that short excerpt, we can sort of see the impact this might have on the average consumer if they were to read this book, which of course, Muckraking Journalism, it was groundbreaking for its time. It was very interesting. It was on a lot of people's minds, particularly, again, of the middle class, and particularly of women who were often at home during the day. Maybe they would pick this up, they would read it, and they started to realize what was being done with their meat. And for a lot of people hearing about how the meatpacking industry was working, they might not be as concerned with the plight of the immigrants. They might not have been as concerned with trying to help those who were maybe less fortunate that were dealing with these conditions, but they most certainly started to speak out against the conditions in which their meat was being prepared. And as you heard there, finding out that oftentimes things that had gone sour or things that were spoiled were still being sold at market, and they had no idea. For muckrakers, another way that they are able to get people's attention is by using photographs. So Lewis Hine is going to be one of the most influential photographers at this time. We have actually already looked at some of his photography in this class. So as far as Hine, we've looked at it particularly when we looked at industrialization and looking at how children are going to be used in factories. So here are just a few different examples of some of the photographs that Lewis Hine was able to take. And as people start to see different photos, whether it be something like this showing these young children at work, or again here showing these small laborers, what happens is that they are going to become very much upset with what they are seeing, and it causes people, again, particularly women, to speak out against what's taking place because of industrialization and the sort of rapid rise of the industrial sort of capitalistic system in the United States. Now, that's not to say that there weren't people involved who were male as well. There are plenty of men who were also involved in this progressive era. But again, we have to keep in mind the progressives, many of them begin as middle-class women, and they're really going to be trying to put forward new ideas on how to maybe keep children out of the labor force, how to keep better conditions for things like their meat. And that's not the only thing they start to realize might not be produced in the most sanitary way. But in doing so, it does help to push for some real reforms. By the time you get to the end of this era, you have presidents like Theodore Roosevelt who are progressives, and they are putting forward many of these same ideas. They're trying to attack some of these big business practices without actually hurting the businesses themselves. They're trying their best to put forward new laws for things like labor and for children as well.